Let's start in East Africa, shall we? South Sudan's President Salva Kiir is expected in Sudan in the next 24 hours for talks with his northern counterpart, Omar Hassan al-Bashir. Now, those talks are aimed at keeping oil, on which both states depend, flowing. Tuesday's visit will be Kiir's second to Khartoum since South Sudan's secession in 2011. Diplomats do hope it will help build a bit of trust between these two neighbours who fought one of Africa's longest civil wars. In March, both sides agreed to defuse tensions and to resume oil exports from landlocked South Sudan through pipelines in the north. But Sudan has threatened to cut oil shipments by September the 6th. That's practically the end of this week, unless the South cuts alleged ties with rebels operating across the disputed and largely unmarked border. South Sudan, however, denies providing any such support. Over in Zimbabwe, up to 900 workers at the Dalni mine near Kadoma have been sent on unpaid leave after the gold producer was shut down, with its Canada-based parent, New Dawn Mining Company, blaming the lack of progress in its indigenization program as well as problems with power supply. Now, the company also says it is entirely uncertain about the continued viability of its other operations in the country, which include Old Nick and the Turk Angelos mines in the Matabeleland regions, as well as Camperdown and Golden Quarry mines in the Midlands. In a statement, the company said the mine would remain under care and maintenance until it manages to satisfactorily address the financial and operational issues that contributed to its shutdown, or until a potential sale, joint venture or some other arrangement can be realized. Now, South African union leaders are warning that mine owners could provoke violence in the way they're handling pay talks, as the companies insist that wage hikes will force mine closures and cost thousands of jobs in the sector as a whole. The National Union of Mine Workers, which represents about two-thirds of more than 120,000 unionized gold miners in Africa's biggest economy, is set to strike starting tomorrow. South African Airways and construction workers are still on strike. Auto industry workers, they're also on strike. This, as a matter of fact, is their third week of strike action. In the meantime, petrol and dealership workers postponed their strike to allow for more talks as South Africa grapples with its so-called season of strikes. Now, shutting down gold mines could cripple an industry that has produced about a third of the world's bullion, but is now in rapid decline. But it is, however, some good news on one end. A strike by clothing and textile workers has so far been averted. Still in South Africa, the country is debating government plans on introducing a new carbon tax of about $11 per tonne of CO2 from 2015. Now, the new policy, from an environmental perspective, is meant to cut emissions. But both businesses and environmental critics warn that this new tax would severely affect South Africa's weak economy and its ability to create new jobs.
Eskom's flagship Medupi power plant, when complete, will be the world's biggest coal-powered power station, but also a major contributor to greenhouse gases. It's an investment badly needed to reduce energy shortages and drive economic growth. Under the proposed new law, taxes raised from emissions from plants like Medupi could also be passed on to consumers. It's an issue that's raising concerns with business leaders.
It's a cost on business. It's potentially an effort by a government that's increasingly desperate for revenues to cover its budget deficit, to extract more revenues from the productive side of the economy and inject them into the consumption side of the economy.
SACLI is concerned about the relevance of carbon tax to the South African economy at this stage, both in terms of our development as well as in terms of the performance of our economy right now.
While business groups and think tanks question the introduction of the tax, there is an international imperative as it positions the country as part of the low-carbon economy.
Carbon tax is one of the building blocks that we need in order to move the country towards the low-carbon economy. So it's just one of the tools. It's one of the tools that government feels comfortable because it will bring extra revenue into the coffer, also extra revenue to do other things. And that is what's very innovative.
The move to join the international low-carbon economy is not welcome by all, though. Some groups believe that it should be delayed until the country is growing at more than 5% a year.
Carbon taxes are something that countries can afford as a luxury once they've reached a level of socio-economic development that far exceeds that's true of South Africa today.
South Africa is the world's 42nd heaviest polluter on a per capita rate of 8.8 metric tons a year. On the other hand, the country is languishing behind its developing world trading partners in terms of economic growth. It's been argued that this mismatch can't be resolved by imposing a carbon tax, but the government has to honour its international commitments. This means that companies can begin planning for the inevitable and consumers can begin planning to dig deeper into those pockets to pay for goods and services. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg.
Right then, plenty of news coming out of South Africa. Let's get the latest reactions from South Africa and elsewhere in London, with particular emphasis on the strike action. CCTV Sumitra Naidu is in Johannesburg and Miriam Bemard is live in London. They join us now on the line. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Sumitra, let's start with you. What's the latest as far as the strikes in South Africa are concerned?
Well, Rama, the unions seem to be intensifying their strike action in most sectors. The strike at SAA has entered its second week. Construction workers remain on strike in the automotive sector. That strike has now cost the economy around $600 million thus far. That strike now entering its third week. And the gold sector is gearing for industrial action tomorrow. That's expected to cost $34 million a day. There was some good news, though, today. A potential strike amongst clothing and textile workers was averted. SACTU, which has over 50,000 members, agreed to an average of 10% increases in wages effective the 1st of September.
Indeed. Miriam, however, let's get on to this gold strike that will, of course, be starting in the next 24 hours. South Africa at the moment produces about, what, 6 or so % of global gold supply. So from an international perspective, any disruption in supply from South Africa wouldn't really hit the market that hard, would it?
No, exactly, Rama. Since the start of August, gold prices are up by about 7%. And we're actually seeing renewed momentum in the gold rally because of, things like ongoing tensions in the Middle East, instability in emerging markets, and of course, growing uncertainty about what happens if we see U.S. Fed tapering. This all means that despite the supply problems in South Africa, physical demand for gold ETF liquidation is actually quite strong, and we could see gold prices fluctuate with new buyers of gold and, of course, the usual EM buyers shying away from buying due to their own deteriorating currencies.
Indeed. Sumitra, we have seen reports of gold mining companies in South Africa mulling over a lockout as a last resort tactic in dealing with the unions. What exactly would a lockout entail?
Well, Rama, a lockout hasn't been confirmed. Basically, a lockout means that all operations will cease, and even workers that are striking and do want to work will not be able to go to work. According to the Labour Relations Act, the employer has the right to apply for a lockout, but if a court grants permission, workers need 48 hours notification before the lockout. In this case, it's too late now as the strike starts tomorrow, and there's no real benefit for the lockout at this stage unless the companies are worried about safety and damage to property. But as I say, in this case, it's too late now because it's no longer 48 hours.
Indeed, the 48-hour window has closed. Miriam, 120,000 plus workers in the gold mining sector, majority of them set to go on strike tomorrow. What sort of endgame scenarios are your investors looking at?
Investors are worried, Rama. It'll either get worse before it gets better, or it's simply the unknown. They're pricing in more job cuts in the mining sector, especially after, of course, platinum producer Anglo American Platinum said it would slash over 3,000 jobs next month as it restructures the company. Now, some argue the big losers here really will be South African government and, of course, the workers. If we saw a complete shutdown of the gold sector, it could cost South Africa more than $35 million a day in lost output. And this would also deter foreign investors, of course, from putting money into South Africa's mining sector. Right now there's already ongoing strikes in things like the auto manufacturing, construction and aviation services, and facing potential strikes from textile workers and, of course, petrol station employees.
Indeed, $35 million a day, not exactly a small amount of money, but let's look at a different number, a more positive one in this case, Sumitra. African Rainbow Minerals, providing some trend-breaking numbers here. Earnings up about 8%, also high dividend payout. Break down the numbers for us.
Yes, well, Rama, African Rainbow Minerals really defined the tough times in the industry. The company reported higher output in platinum, nickel, iron ore, coal. It did see a slight dip in ferrous production, but not too much. It saw strong gains across those sectors, the biggest contribution coming from platinum, that leading to 60 million rand input into headline earnings, raising that headline earnings coming to 3.74 billion rand compared to last year's 3.45 billion. It's really leaving the company in a strong cash position as well. So strong gains across that sector, output, accounting as well, all adding to that. And of course, the weaker rand also helped in terms of its exports.
Indeed, and that, of course, is a unicorn. Doesn't happen often that we end this segment on good news. Thank you very much for your time this evening. CCTV Sumita Knight in Johannesburg and Miriam Bemad live in London. We'll, of course, be keeping tabs on the continuing developments in South Africa and have the details right here for you on BizAfrica. Elsewhere, the International Mining and Infrastructure Corporation has signed an offtake agreement with China's largest producer of steel, Hebei. Now, this will be for iron ore produced from a firm in Cameroon, which IMIC is in the process of acquiring. A junior mining firm, Afero, has agreed to a $190 million cash and paper offer for the company from IMIC in May. Now, IMIC, which is allied to the African Iron Ore Group, says it can build the infrastructure necessary to start production at its project in Cameroon. A similar offtake agreement was crucial to African Minerals' construction of the railway connecting their iron ore project in Sierra Leone, according to IMIC. An Ethiopian Airlines 737 Boeing aircraft made history by being the largest aircraft to make a landing at the newly opened 2.4-kilometer runway at Egal International Airport in Somaliland. Now, that facility was opened about a week ago after completion of the last phase of the recarpeting of the entire runway and the modernization of the facility. The arrival and departure terminals have also been completely renovated. Somaliland Minister of Aviation Mahmoud Hashi Abdi says that the new route will increase trade ties between the two Horn of African nations. The national carrier of Ethiopia mentioned that it has officially added Hargeisa to its growing list of international destinations. Time for a short break here on BizAfrica. Here's what's coming up next. Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote, unveils plans to build Africa's first privately held and potentially the largest oil refinery. We'll have the details when we come back.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back. Africa's richest man and the chairman of the Dangote Group of Companies, Aliko Dangote, recently outlined plans to borrow about $3.3 billion to partially fund the construction of a $9 billion oil refinery and petrochemical complex in Nigeria. Now, at the moment, his group has interests ranging from cement to basic food processing to oil and gas. If his multi-billion-dollar bet does go according to plan, Nigeria could be way less dependent on fuel imports than it is right now. CCTV's Peter Akaba now explains.
The refinery, which will be located in Nigeria's southwest region, will have the double distinction of being Africa's first privately held and largest petroleum refinery. With a projected daily production output of some 400,000 barrels, the project will double Nigeria's overall capacity.
It's a welcome development for this Nigerian economy. You know, we know what has been happening. Importers do hold us to ransom. Tanker drivers do hold us to ransom. Even the petrol attendants hold us to ransom to this economy. And being a mono economy, as we all know, everything depends on oil.
Despite being Africa's largest oil producer, Nigeria relies mainly on imports for petrol to fuel cars and generators. Government-owned refineries operate at less than 30% capacity. The total cost of the project is pegged at some $9 billion, financed by a consortium of Nigerian banks. The Dangote Group has committed $3.5 billion of its own equity.
It's not like, okay, you must build a humongous ones like the one that they were building before. And here him coming up with this 9 billion loan that he's talking about. It's not like he's going to ask for 9 billion. He's asking for 3.3, then 2.5, will be like gotten from the grants or from other agencies. Then he has his own equity that's going to put into it. I think it's a welcome development. This is the best thing, to happen to Nigeria economy, especially as we depend solely on oil for everything that we do.
And it's a milestone for us and for Nigeria. For a man like Dangote to single-handedly embark on industrialization, I think it's a great honor for him and for the country. If we have 5 of Dangotes in Nigeria with the same mindset of industrializing this country, then we'll be saying goodbye to unemployment.
Aliko Dangote was recently ranked 43rd on the Forbes 2013 World Billionaires list, with a fortune of some $16.1 billion. If successful, the new refinery will enhance his stature as Africa's leading industrialist and boost his already sizable fortune significantly. Peter Akaba, CCTV.
Now let's talk about Zimbabwe. The African Development Bank has commended that country on its economic policies and its commitments to address debt arrears following the International Monetary Fund's supervised economic reform. Now, the IMF approved a staff-monitored program on Zimbabwe in June, and that runs all the way up to December. A staff-monitored program, to put it simply, is an informal agreement between a country's authorities and the fund's staff to monitor the implementation of the country's economic program. But it doesn't entail any financial assistance or endorsement by the IMF's executive board. This is Zimbabwe's first IMF agreement in more than a decade. In its latest report on the country, the FDB says implementation of that program should help to re-establish a track record of sound macroeconomic policies, and it is an important stepping stone towards clearing arrears and an IMF-supported debt relief program. Ernst & Young and Old Mutual have been named the top African employers by the just-released annual Top Employers Africa Certification Program. Ernst & Young for South Africa, Namibia, Kenya, Mauritius, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana and Nigeria emerged at the top, followed by Old Mutual in Kenya, South Africa, Namibia and Zimbabwe. Now, the other top companies in that ranking are British American Tobacco, information and tech company SAP, security firm G4S, Microsoft, and the consumer goods company Unilever. Now, the program showed that good people management meant the difference between success or failure on the continent, and leading employers in Africa do continue to invest quite heavily in developing their people as a key pillar of their growth strategy on the continent as a whole. All right then, quick run through the markets. Depending on which trend you've been following over the last couple of weeks, well, pretty much new month, same story. But as we shall see, that's not always the case across the board. The Nigerian All-Share Index, for example, ending the day higher, up about a quarter. The All-Share Index in South Africa also in the green. The labour wars we've seen over there, notwithstanding, it ended the day higher by a full percentage point. The 20-share index in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, however, in quite a bit of trouble. The bear run that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, of course, still in full force, really, down by about 0.6, and the Egyptian market ending the day in the red, down a full percentage point. That's business for you. Hope that was a profitable 20 minutes. Back to sport now with Beatrice.